Let me hit. Hi, everyone, again. Thank you so much for coming today to our first METAS workshop. It is completely online from 5 to 6 p.m. And today's workshop topic is on Transfer 101. For anyone who just came in, thank you so much for coming. We're going to go ahead and pass it on to Angelica now.
Yes, hello everyone. Just quickly, my name is Angelica. I'll give a little bit more of a bio in a bit. But yes, welcome to our first workshop of the Metas workshop series. We're definitely committed to supporting students every step of the way, from the application process to learning about TAG, the transfer application process, all of it. So very excited to have you all here today. And just as an FYI, this session will cover more of the basics around transfer. So my goal is to really cover what it means to transfer, exploring your options when it comes to the UC, CSUs, a little bit of like the private schools, and understanding that path and next steps that you all can take, whether you're considering transferring for fall 2026 or for the summer, or if you're applying to transfer or still thinking about it, right? Definitely want to make sure that you have all the information that you need to make informed decisions around like what's best for you. So throughout the presentation, feel free to ask any questions and we'll get to your questions as soon as possible. I'll be kind of checking the chat as well. But I think first, if we could have you all sign in through a Zoom call, right? And I think everyone had it pop up. So if you can take some time answering some of these questions. And Zaira, you'll end the poll, right? When
Yeah, I'll go ahead and
okay,
end it in 2 minutes.
cool.
Instant ID.
Cool. Yeah. So folks can sign in. That way we know that you attended the workshop and we can follow up with you with any additional resources and things like that. So we would appreciate if you sign in for us so we know who's in the space today. Hmm. And while y'all are doing that, I'll take some time to go over as y'all are still signing in, checking in through the poll, I'll take some time to kind of, again, review the agenda. So again, very much today is about reviewing the transfer basics, what it means to transfer, some transfer options, and ending it with some resources and Q&A at the end. So that's kind of like the flow for the next hour. Cool. So a little bit about myself. So my name's Angelica. I'm one of the counselors here at Berkeley City College, specifically with the Undocumented Community Resource Center is the program I work more closely with. And more importantly, I'm also a proud first generation Latinx student. I was the first in my family to attend and graduate from college. I started my journey as well at community college. I actually went to Ohlone College in Fremont, but from the East Bay. And I still remember of like the different challenges and confusion when it came to navigating the world of transfer. And I myself remember just feeling overwhelmed by the transfer process. And because of that, I ended up just applying to 3 schools. Not that that's a bad thing, but I think I look back and wish that I would have maybe thought a little bit more around like my different options. But I think I was kind of winging it back then. And yeah, totally wish I would have done more research and gone to workshops like this or connected with counselors to really help understand the process because back then it just felt really scary and it is totally scary and can be fusing with so much information. But know that you have a community behind you and so important to tap into the different resources that exist. So excited to be in this journey with you all as you kind of begin your own journey. Um, and ultimately, I ended up, after 3 years of community college, ended up transferring to UCLA. I majored in sociology, minored in Chicano and Chicano studies, and did 2 years there. So that was a little bit brief overview around my transfer journey. Um, but I think back of like how scary it is in the beginning, like exploring all the different requirements and things like that. And we'll kind of go through it today. But that's a little bit about me. So know that you can always reach out to me, to anyone on the team, counseling, right? That we're here to support you in your journey. Cool. So I love in the chat to take some time. I'm curious to learn more about what brings you in today. I think you all may be at different points of your own transfer journey and totally okay. And just curious of like, if there's any specific questions, curiosities, what your own educational career goals may be, or kind of what is motivating you, right, to transfer. What is your why? Or are you still thinking about it, right? So curious if we could in the chat, if you feel comfortable sharing or privately messaging me, yeah, if there's any specific questions, concerns, your why, right? Um, I'd love to know who's in this space today. So we'll take some time and I'll kind of be reviewing the chat. But I think as a first generation college student, I bring up of like understanding your why or reflecting about your why. Because at least as I look back in my own journey, it's been very helpful and important to keep what keeps me grounded, right? When things get hard. And you all may have your own personal reasons, right? For pursuing your education, going to community college, thinking about transferring. So yeah, curious to know and see if you know what your why is, what motivates you, right? To keep pushing even when you're overwhelmed or unsure, the uncertainties, right, of everything. And I think for me, my why is my family, right? And I'm the first in my family to go to college. And as I look back at my own journey, I've always had my family in mind, right? And wanting to open new doors, not just for myself, but for my family. And that has given me purpose and strength. So, yeah, curious, right? As throughout the presentation, thinking about, or your own journey, right? Thinking about what that why is for you. And yeah, so I'm curious in the chat. Cool. Okay, we have folks interested in the nursing program. Awesome. So yeah, feel free throughout the presentation to private message me or in the main chat. Okay, thinking about UC Berkeley. For sure, family as why. Yeah, connection, community. So welcome, Lauren. Welcome, Eric. Oh, that's awesome to be going to college with your son. The community. Cool. Keep them coming. I definitely will take time to read and go over, and please feel free to private message me. But yeah, I think it's everyone's path is going to look different, right? So taking some time to kind of reflect on what brings you in today. What are you looking to learn more about? Um, okay. But yes, please keep your responses coming. Um, So, kind of before we get started, a disclaimer that in today's session, we're going to cover some general information. And I think it's super important to follow up with your counselor for personalized guidance because requirements, they vary depending on your major, transfer universities, every person's situation is different, even the year, right? So always double check anything you learn about today or throughout all the presentations for METAS to follow up with your counselor. And again, remember that certain things vary. So just kind of like an FYI, a disclaimer as we kind of begin the journey, right? That um, this information, right, depending on your major, can be different, can vary. Um, so first I would love to break down of like what is transferring from a community college. So we're gonna take it to the basics. So transferring means, right, you're beginning your college journey at a community college. And once you've completed certain requirements, you are able then to move on to a four-year university like a California State University, like a UC, right, or a private college or an out-of-state, right, college to finish your bachelor's degree. So this path, right, of starting at a community college and transferring um, is popular, I think, for a majority of students. They begin their journey, right? Maybe it's around like saving money on tuition. That community college offers smaller class sizes to start. It also provides some time to learn more about yourself, your interests, and really prepare for university level work, right? With the strong support system that you get at a community college. So I think there's a lot of different benefits of like starting at a community college and that you can really focus on your general ed classes, your major courses, and then earning the 60 transferable units to then get your bachelor's degree, right? Um, and we'll talk about kind of the transfer timeline in a bit. Um, that the next right of like why transfer, and I think again that this is going to be different for everybody, right? Everyone has their own personal reasons for wanting to transfer or starting their academic journey. It may be right a step towards reaching your academic and career goals. Other reasons that students choose to transfer, right, could be pursuing the bachelor's degree, right? Many careers require or prefer applicants have a bachelor's degree. There's also different transfer agreements within the community college system, right? Special agreements with the UC, CSUs, certain private universities, right? You can get guaranteed admission. Um, oh, did I not? Oh, sorry. I think we're on the right side. Career advancement, a bachelor's degree, right, might open doors to more job opportunities, higher earning potential. You may be the first in your family, right, to transfer. So earning that bachelor's degree is a meaningful step for your family, for your community. There's also the personal growth piece of learning more about yourself, having new experiences, meeting new people, so growing personally, but also academically. So I think it's going to be, there's a lot of reasons why folks decide to transfer. For me, it was a taking a step right towards my career goals, but also an opportunity to learn more about myself and interests. I, right, born in the Bay, went to transferred to a school in Southern California. So learned a lot about myself in that journey. So I think there's a lot of different benefits. And just to reiterate, right, as a transfer student, you can also save money at community college. You are building at community college a strong foundation in your major and your general ed courses. So when you transfer, you're diving in straight into your major coursework at the university, so that when you transfer, you typically can earn your bachelor's degree within 2 years, right? Because you've completed the majority of your classes at community college potentially. And kind of like a visual of this, I wanted to provide kind of like a visual of the basics of higher education and the different levels. And as you can see, we're right there, right? We're at community college, we're in step one, Berkeley City College. And at a community college, that's where you can earn, right, an associate's degree, which typically is about 2 years. And once you complete, right, the certain transfer requirements, like the general ed, the major prep courses, you have the option of transferring to a 4 year, a university, right, to get the bachelor's degree. So that would be the level 2, right? And from there, you can continue right within your journey if you want to get like a master's degree or get a doctorate degree. So this is kind of like the timeline and the different levels. But again, it's very important to note that college timelines are going to vary by the person. Everyone's journey looks different depending on their major, personal responsibilities, if you're a full-time, part-time college student. But this, I hope, roadmap kind of gives you a general idea of the path ahead, right? Cool. I'm going to check the chat if there's any questions. Oh, okay. And feel free, folks, answer any questions in the chat. So I'd love to review some, I think, common myths that I hear about transfer a lot, or yeah, as a counselor, things that I've heard. And I'd love if you all want to, in the chat, I don't know, put myth, half truth, or as we kind of go through each of them. Or maybe y'all haven't heard of these, or yeah, but this is kind of what I hear a lot of, like one being like going to a UC will cost more money, or CSUs are cheaper. Who's heard that? Do you feel like that's a common thing that y'all hear? I'm trying to open the chat. Yeah, right. Like you may have heard that a lot. I'm not. Um, So I think again, when it comes to this, it can be kind of like a half truth for this question of it really depends on the university and its location. So sometimes thinking about the cost of living for your total expenses, not just the tuition. For example, like UC Merced, the total cost is usually around $28,500, and San Jose State, right, is about $29,000, right? So thinking about the location. So going to a UC may not cost, right? CSUs may not always be the cheaper route, right? The more affordable route. So again, I think that's where it's like looking broadly and doing your research around the location, the university. So it's going to depend. Getting to a UC is harder. That's another one that I hear a lot as well. And I think this is another one that also depends on the major, right? Specific UC campuses that you're applying to, but also some CSUs, especially if it's a selective major, have strict course requirements and admission standards, right? So that may not always be true as well. Another thing that I sometimes hear, maybe not so much now, but like that UCs are better. And again, this is subjective, right? I think a popular CSU is like Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, right? Is always highly ranked and even compared to some UCs. So I think what's better varies again based on your major, the program's focus, the location preference. Um, Something else that I hear a lot of, like, also everyone gets into CSU East Bay or San Francisco State, which are our local schools. And I think our local schools, right, still have the minimum admission requirements that you need in order to get in. And it helps, right, that they're local. Um, and then lastly, around like, I think I can just complete my general ed requirements and transfer to a university. And this is also kind of like a half truth that you will need minimum amount of general ed, but there are also major requirements that you will need to take to be eligible to transfer, right? And again, that also varies by university. So I think you may hear a lot of different things in your journey at BCC, but it's really important to do your own research, check in with your counselor, with admission representatives, and again to make the best decision for you, right? Because everyone's path is look different, and in the end, right, when you graduate, they all provide you with the same degree. So finding the campus that's the best fit for you. Cool. So now we're gonna go over some of the transfer options. Um, so when you're thinking about being ready to transfer, you have several types of universities to choose from. We're going to go over today like the UC system, the California State Universities, and private universities. So again, I think as we're going through the different options, I encourage you to kind of reflect and consider, well, what's important for you, right, when you're thinking about transferring? What kind of campus environment will you thrive in? Classroom environment? What type of learner are you? What kind of experience are you looking for? What are your career goals, academic goals? What values, priorities you have, right? Is it location, class size, program reputation, the different support services? So again, I think it's always about like finding the right fit for you, that it's not always going to be about the prestige, right, of a university potentially, but where you're going to feel the most supported, challenge, and growth. So the first system we're going to talk about is the CSUs. Um, so kind of some key facts around the CSU systems is, so CSUs are public universities funded by the state of California. There's 23 CSU campuses across the state. And I think what makes CSUs different from UCs is that they're known overall to be more career focused, more technical skills, practical, because the education is designed to give you skills relevant to your career, to a job. So there's more of that focus and lens for the CSU system. When it comes to class size, it can range, I feel like, but it's usually medium to large. Sometimes you have around 300 students, like for larger classroom sizes, right? But I think it also varies by your major. Most classes are taught by professors with doctoral degrees who are often like in the field, right? Or they're doing active research. Um, in larger classes, you'll often have a teaching assistant to help, usually a graduate, post-grad student. And we'll talk more about the requirements in a bit, but you need to complete at least the 60 transferable units in order to transfer. And tuition is about, it's probably more, I think it's more now, but it's usually about six per year. Yeah, about 6,000. Um, I usually think per semester. I need to double check this, y'all. But that doesn't include fees or living expenses. So a couple things to consider when it comes to the CSU systems is that certain majors are impacted, meaning they may have more limited space and be more selective, more competitive. Um, Typically, for example, like SF State, I think nursing is impacted, right? Um, but you can double check. Usually I type in like CSU impaction list, or you type in the CSU and you put impacted majors and you'll get a list if there's any impacted majors. And that just means that it's more competitive. So we want to make sure um, that your GPA, major prep courses, right, that it's going to be a little bit more competitive. Um, and for the CSUs, something to consider is the application process is through Cal State Apply, right? And we'll talk about this in a little bit, but you can get like an associate's degree for transfer, which is that priority guaranteed admission into the CSU system. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But that's a benefit, right? Because side note, you can transfer with or without an associate's degree. That's not always a requirement, but if your major does have an associate degree for transfer and you're thinking about the CSU system, that might be beneficial, right? Um, and then for general education, the CSUs, so starting fall 2025, if you're a new incoming student, your general education pattern, we're going to be following Cal GETSI, which is the new transfer pattern curriculum of general education. It's called Cal GETSI. But if you have been a student with us, you still have, for general education, you can complete it through IGETC, the CSU general education pattern. So it really depends what pattern you're following to satisfy the general ed requirements. So checking in with your counselor, right, to determine if the general ed pattern that you're following is also fulfilling the CSU general ed requirements. So that's typically, again, CSU's more practical based, and we have 23 campuses.
Angelica, we do have two questions in the
Yes.
chat. One of them is asking uh, if they need to do their school online, do you think it's a good idea to do Cal State online?
Cal State Online, like transferring to an online program?
Mhm.
I guess it depends if your major for that CSU is offering an online program and if that's your preference, totally. And you can double check. There's certain programs that are offer it online. Yeah. Otherwise, you may need to go in person. More likely you'll for other majors, right? You'll have to go in person, but if it's an online program, yeah, totally.
Awesome. And the second question is why is it bad to only apply to one place if that's all you want? So this student said that, for example, they want to go to UC Berkeley because they live in Berkeley,
Yeah.
and they want to know if this is just a myth or if you have to apply to more than one place.
Yeah, no, totally. I think having my counselor hat on, I usually recommend to students to apply them to more than one place just to have options, right? If you know you want to go to a certain university, right? Totally, that's great. But I think it's always good to have different options just in case. Have a plan B, plan C, right? But it's totally up to the student to decide. So if you wanted to just apply to one university, you totally can do so. But then we may need to plan, right? If for any reason, right, you don't get admitted to your first choice, right? What would be the plan B, plan C, right? So I think we recommend to apply broadly, to think about tagging to a UC or applying to other options just as backups, but it's totally up to the student. So I recommend checking in with your counselor.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. So now some facts about the UCs. So similarly to the CSUs, public universities funded by the state, there's 9 undergraduate campuses. I'm not counting, so UC San Francisco is only for graduate studies. So with that, it would be 10, but it's 9 for undergraduate studies. So the UCs are more theory based, right, and research. So it's going to give you a more analytical understanding for your field and your major. Sorry, let me. Class sizes, I think, could be quite large, sometimes up to 500 students. But I also remember being in lectures, and it was just like 20 of us. So I think it varies and it depends on your major, like your class size. Most classes, again, are taught by professors with doctoral degrees who are actively involved in research. I think most times you may be interacting more with like a teacher assistant, often like a graduate student for larger classes. Similarly, right, for the UCs, you need 60 UC transferable units. And tuition, I think, is roughly around like 13,000 per year, and that doesn't include living expenses. Something else to note that's not on the slide, but I was thinking about that UCs also can be, they could have a different academic calendar. So, for example, some UCs may be quarter system, and quarter system means that the year is divided into, I think it's 3 or 4 quarters. Oh, no, 4 counting summer, right? So you have your fall, winter, and spring quarter. So it's 10 weeks. So it may be a little different, right, than you're used to, because at BCC, right, we're semester system. So some UCs may be quarter system. And then some things to consider is that UCs, there's certain selective majors, popular campuses, so admission can be competitive, right? So UC Berkeley selective majors are typically like the sciences, business administration, engineering, psychology, kind of like are known to be selective. But there's also Davis, UC Irvine, where like computer science, business administration is also pretty popular. But something to note is that the applications are a holistic process. So they're not just looking at grades, they're looking at personal insight questions, and other different things, right, that you include in your application. And with the UC system, they also offer the transfer admission guarantee, which we have a workshop on that later in the summer. So I'm not going to go too much into tag. That will be a different workshop. But I think tag is a great option, right? You can tag to one school. It excludes Berkeley, UCLA, and San Diego, but I think could be a great option. And then UCs accept IGETC, right? When it comes to the transfer curriculum, we're looking at IGETC or CalGETC if you're starting fall 2025 for general education. And then financial aid for UCs, again, the blue and gold plan. So it had helps cover tuition if you are a resident and your family income is less than $80,000. The UCs will cover your tuition. So there could sometimes be more generous, I feel like, financial aid packages, sometimes more than the CSUs, but I think everyone's situation is different. But yeah, that's kind of a little bit about the UCs. And then private universities. So again, while the UCs and CSUs are funded by California, private universities are typically funded through private parties, donors. We have about 113 private colleges in California. Some of them may be affiliated, have religious affiliations. They may offer some majors that are not found at public universities. Classes tend to be smaller. Similarly, right, professors typically hold doctoral degrees. And transfer requirements may vary by campus. You may not need 60 units. So I think it's important to do the research, right, when it comes to private universities. And the same goes to any university outside of California. The transfer requirements may vary, and you may not need 60 units. So I definitely recommend doing your research, connecting with a counselor to double check and confirm if you're looking at any schools outside UC CSUs, right? Tuition can range, right, from 12K to 48K per year. So tuition may be higher, right? Um, but they may offer, right, generous financial aid packages. Things to consider: private schools use a different application system to apply for admission. It's Common App. And similarly to the UCs, it's a holistic process, right? So they're looking at personal statements, potentially letters of recommendation. Um, and then for private colleges, they may accept IGETC, right, our transfer curriculum. So I think it's just important to double check and confirm because it does vary. Um, so this goes for out-of-state universities as well, or universities outside of the United States, right? Those transfer requirements may vary. So just double checking, going to the website and confirming what those requirements are. Um, so those are kind of the systems we're going over today. And I know there's so many more schools and universities beyond that, but I do strongly encourage you to do your research, explore your options, and consider what matters to you, right? Whether that's the location, the program offerings, the campus culture, the support services, the cost, right? Finding schools that are a best fit for you and align with your vision and goals and needs, right? So my tips would be check in with a counselor, check online, talk with admission representatives, as kind of like as you're starting your journey, to make the best decision for you, and developing a student education plan, which we'll talk about.
So we have two more questions. One question is asking about the timeline regarding when to apply to UCs.
Question.
Because they mentioned that typically in high school you apply the fall semester before your requirements are done. And the second question that we have here is, can we transfer to universities abroad?
Yeah, totally. So when it comes to the transfer timeline, and I should have put a slide on this, my bad. But it's very similar to high school. So you're applying 1 year prior to when you'd be starting, right? So for example, the application for the UCs and CSUs opens up October 1st, and the deadline is November 30th. So I'm pretty sure that's how it is. It's like that in high school, right? So you'd be applying 1 year ahead for fall 2026, right? But you would be applying fall 2025 semester. So that's kind of like the transfer timeline for the CSUs and UCs. You're applying 1 year. And then for private schools, it varies. The timeline varies for the transfer timeline. But great question. And then, yes, you can totally apply to universities abroad. My recommendation for that would be, right, I think, again, every university is going to have different requirements, prerequisites, policies in place, maybe for international students in this case. So I think research will be important, connecting with admission representatives and learning more about what that looks like for you as like an international student and going to a university abroad. Any other questions, concerns? Um, Now to understanding like the transfer process. So I want to talk about the transfer requirements. And again, this is very much geared towards like the UC and CSU system, but I think this can apply to a lot of private universities, out of state universities. Um, so what you need to know, essentially, the key requirements here is that you need 60 transferable units that count when you are enrolling in classes, right? You have classes that are 3, 4 units, right? So in total, we need 60 transferable units, and that's going to be a mix of your general ed classes, right? That's I Get C, CSU General Education, Cal Get C, right? It's the general ed pattern plus your major classes that you need for your major, right? And we'll look up what website you can use to check what major prep you need to take, and then any other electives, right? And that should equal 60 or more units, right? So you need the 60 units, and then you need a minimum for the CSUs, a 2.0 GPA, and for CSUs 2.4. Again, this is the minimum, right? GPA requirements for private and out of state universities is going to vary by campus. So I would double check the website. But again, that 60 units is going to be your general ed. So that's your English, critical thinking English class, your arts and humanities, your math and science, the ethnic studies requirement, right? And then your major classes is going to vary based on your major. If you are a STEM major, definitely my recommendation is always to focus on major prep. For STEM majors, I think there's very much of, because it's such a high unit, typically the majors are so high unit, we want you to focus on your major prep instead of general education, right? Definitely still do your English classes, but for STEM majors, I recommend major prep, but consult with your counselor. And for selective majors, obviously it's going to be more competitive, right? So that typically requires a higher GPA, potentially more major prep classes, full general education completion, and supplemental material. So again, it's going to vary, but I think typically this is the minimum requirements, right? And when we're looking at the CSUs, this is kind of like an overview of the CSU requirements, but again, you need the 60 units, the 2.0 GPA, be in good standing, and for general education for the CSUs, you definitely need what's called the Golden Four. And that's going to be your English composition, your critical thinking, oral communications class, and college level math. Those are the 4 general ed requirements minimum to be able to transfer if you're just looking at CSUs. But again, to be competitive, you may want to complete general education, complete the required courses needed for your major, have a competitive GPA, and or a completion of an associate's degree for transfer, right? And this is where I kind of wanted to go over the associate's degree for transfers, because again, this can strengthen your chances into getting into a CSU if that is your goal. So the associate degree for transfers is a 2-year degree, right, that you can earn, an associate's degree, right, that you can earn at community college that's designed to transfer to a CSU. So if you see any associate's degrees that have the T at the end, it's an associate's degree for transfer, right? So if your major is within arts or humanities, it's an AAT, so associate in arts for transfer. If it's in a science field, it would be an AST, so associate in science for transfer. So for example, at BCC, we have a biology AST, we have a physics AST, we have a math AST. For arts, we have art AAT, communications, child and adolescent development, economics, sociology, psychology. So we have a bunch of associate degree for transfers. So I encourage you, if your major has an AST or an AAT, it may be beneficial if you're thinking about the CSUs to get an ADT, because it would be that guaranteed priority admission into a CSU, right? And it doesn't necessarily need to be your first choice, right? So you can earn the associate's degree at the community college and have that guaranteed transfer admission into the CSU. So I think there's a benefit there potentially, right? And that includes completing general ed plus the major prep classes needed for that specific, for the degree.
So we have another question. Is there a maximum amount of units that makes somebody ineligible to transfer?
No, there's not a max, but there is a certain amount that the UCs and the I don't know about the CSUs, but I know the UCs cap the amount of units that you can count, right, when you're applying. So I think I want to say that it's about 80 units, and that's when they cap you, and anything more than that, you wouldn't be able to transfer to your upper division coursework, if that makes sense. So I think there is a cap of how many units, right, will be counted. But I would check in with your counselor to confirm what programs you're interested in and confirm what those UCCSU caps are. I could look at that up afterwards too. Any other questions?
There is another question about AATs. If you
Yeah.
get an AAT because that's the option for your chosen major, but don't plan to transfer to a CSU for the same major, are you
Yeah.
still able to complete the AAT? Um, for example, AAT Psych, but I can also get an AA Liberal Social.
Yeah, you can stack up the degrees, and that's my recommendation. And when you meet with the counselor, you can confirm of like, oh, what other associate degrees, ADTs that you're eligible, but you can get multiple degrees, even if you're not planning to transfer to that specific program or if that's not your transfer major. But let's say you get an ADT and you don't want to transfer to a CSU, that's also okay. I think there's benefit as well when you're applying in this case, if it's a UC, right? You'll know on your application, right, that you're completing the associate's degree for transfer. So that may be something that you can demonstrate, right, your passion and interest in this field because you're getting the ADT, right, the associate's degree in it. So I think there's still benefit. But obviously, it varies by major, timeline too. So I would double check with your counselor.
And then we have two more questions. Will an AST or AAT help you for impacted majors?
It can. I think it can. Um, I would double check. I think it just depends on what the major is, but I think I've seen that you can get um extra consideration. Yes, that is, and I think that's what we recommend, right? If like it's an impacted major for that CSU, having the ADT, again, it's that guaranteed admission, but it's not always your priority school, but I think it still helps and gives you a little boost.
And then would courses marked with a W count?
W's, if you withdrew from a class, those courses aren't calculated into your GPA. So I think it just depends. I think for UCs, right, if there's a pattern of W's, there's always space in the application to give context as to what was going on. Um, but for the CSUs, I don't there's not space, I don't think, within the application, but I don't think they necessarily negatively impact the student. I'm just
Lots of
writing.
questions.
Yeah,
We
great
have
questions.
we have another question that just popped up. Can I get an AST in business and transfer to the environmental economics and policy BS at UC Berkeley as long as I have the transfer requirements?
Exactly. Yeah. You totally can do that. Yeah. And that's what a lot of students do, right? That you can get an associate's degree in, because a lot of the classes may overlap and align with majors, right? So you totally can do that. Cool. And I'm recognizing the time now and I'm like, oh my God, how did it go by so fast? So yeah, okay. So UCs, again, the 60 units, you need at least a 2.4 GPA. I think the main thing is around completing your major prep and then general education, right? Which general education, the main classes being your English, math, and your other general ed requirements, which in this case would be IGETC or CalGETC. That's what we're calling the the education pattern. And what makes you competitive, right? I think it's completing general education, but again, that varies by major sometimes. Finishing major prep classes with strong grades, having a competitive GPA higher than the minimum, to be honest. And again, understanding the UCs are a holistic review, which again, they're looking at not just your academics, but your experiences through like the PIQs, right? Personal insight questions. But that there's also tag, which again, I think we're going to host another workshop on tag. And so if you want to learn more about tag, I encourage you all to attend. So as you can see, I think for the CSUs and UCs, very kind of similar requirements, some that are different. I think the GPA, there's different requirements, right? CSUs 2.0, minimum 2.4 for UCs, but to be honest, it's higher for UCs, right? Again, depending on your major, how selective it is. General education may vary depending on the schools that you're interested in. Major prep, right, may vary. For UCs, it may tend to be more selective, right? CSUs, if it's an impacted major, and then that the application process, right, varies. So again, reading all those details, doing your research will be important. And I think that kind of leads to the next thing of like when it comes to transferring, it takes planning. Every student's journey is different. So again, depending on your timeline, your major, the universities that you're applying, I think research is key. And I really encourage you to look into the different campuses and programs, understanding what's required for your major, and checking your general ed pattern. What is best for your goals, right? So maybe it's the CSU general education pattern if you just want to do CSUs. Maybe it's IGETC if you want to do UC CSUs. For fall, starting fall 2025, it would be CalGETC. So doing your research, follow up with the counselor are the main things. Some tips, and I think it just depends on where you are in your journey, but typically I recommend that students again start taking the required English and math courses early, right? Because depending on when you want to transfer, certain schools have policies around when they want their math and English completed. Um, I think also we didn't really talk about major, but deciding on a major as soon as possible, especially if you have a certain timeline, could be critical in completing the major prep courses. And again, it's going to vary by campus. So research is key. Working closely with the counselor, I recommend, right, that you can shop around for counselors, connect with that counselor that you feel safe and comfortable with, and develop that working relationship with, because especially when it comes to updating your ed plan and following an ed plan, I think it's important working with a counselor that you feel comfortable with. Um, and they'll help you, right, build your student education plan and stay informed about deadlines and requirements. And then also depending on the schools that you're interested in, looking at transfer admission guarantee, the associate's degree for ADTs to give you an advantage, right, when applying. So I think one last thing, I think if you have 24 units right now, 30 units right now, and you're planning to be full-time fall and spring, right, you may be eligible to transfer for this next application cycle. So I encourage you, if you've completed 24 units or more, to check in with the counselor and see if you may be eligible. And remembering, right, that you're not alone and there's heck of resources and different tools. And that kind of leads, oh my gosh, 1 minute. Can I have time, more time? That's okay to go over some of the resources.
Yeah,
Okay.
we can record it, and then if anyone needs to leave,
Yeah.
we're gonna be sending out the recording, so don't worry about it. But if you
Yeah.
have time, feel free to stay.
Yes. Yeah, I'm almost done, y'all. I think the main thing, and maybe y'all have heard of Assist already, but assist.org is your friend, right? It's a free website that you can log into to see what classes you need to take at community college to apply to public universities like UCs, CSUs, and some private schools, right? You can search it by your major and you can see the courses that you need to take at BCC that match the requirement at the university. So I encourage you, if you have questions around what major classes do I need to take, to use Assist to check your major and see what courses you need to take. And most of the times, those classes will also overlap with like general education. So they can be completing both GE and your major prep courses. So please review Assist, read the details carefully, and bring those questions to your meeting with a counselor to work on your ed plan. So assist.org, amazing website. Another thing that's new, is the CSU Transfer Planner. So if you're thinking about applying to the CSU system, again, this is a free tool that you can make an account and you can start connecting with CSU admission representatives. You can track the classes that you're taking and it calculates your CSU GPA and the different transfer programs, and it tracks your progress and goals. So I definitely recommend setting up an account, especially if you're interested in the CSUs. And then similarly, right, the UCs also have a transfer admission planner that you can start now, right? So if you're interested in the UCs, it's an online tool specifically for community college students, and it's designed to help you track your classes, your coursework. You can connect with UC admission representatives. It's definitely not a replacement. None of this is a replacement for like meeting with a counselor, but I think these tools could be helpful in kind of doing that research and starting your accounts. You can start it now, right? Or if you have, that's awesome, right? And then obviously connecting with the transfer center. We're located on the second floor where counseling is. So this upcoming semester, there's going to be a lot of different programming, campus tours, university rep visits, transfer days. So there's going to be a lot of support. You can also learn about cross enrollment. So as a BCC student, you can take classes at UC Berkeley. So you can learn more about that at the BCC Transfer Center. You can learn more about the Transfer Alliance Project. So a lot of different programs that can help you in your transfer journey. And then just my recommendation around next steps. Again, I think this is going to vary based on where you are in your own transfer journey, but I encourage you all to narrow down what schools you're interested in, prioritize, do your research, look up the majors, the minors, what's offered. If you haven't, in the fall, right, make a point of setting up an appointment with a counselor to develop or update your ed plan. And then connecting with folks, right? Whether that's professors, campus resources, to get the most of your college experience and tapping into the different resources. And starting or continuing, whether it's your transfer admission planner for the UCs, the CSU admission planner, that there's a lot of different resources. This presentation will be shared with you, but these are the different links. And I think that's pretty much it. And there's so much more information, and I think this is very much the basics, right? And I think we all may be at different levels of our own journey. So I think I encourage you all to, we're doing another workshop on the CSU application, the UC application, on TAG. So this is kind of like the beginning and building and trying to build the foundation when it comes to transfer. Let's check the chat. Yes, we do have counselors that are available this summer. Counseling hours are a bit different this summer. I don't know off the top of my head, but I think they're in person Tuesdays and Thursdays, but I would double check the website and see. But we do have counseling available in the summer. Let me see if there's any. No,
looks
yeah.
like, oh, you got it?
What was that?
The question.
Yeah, I think again, double check with your counselor and see that the different options that exist, especially if you're looking to transfer and you may not have gotten the grade right that you were expecting, that there's different options that we can explore, whether it's academic renewal, course repetition, um, so I definitely recommend checking any academic questions, personal questions. I definitely recommend checking in with a counselor to get that personalized support. But there's always, yeah, there's always going to be different options and support. So don't not count yourself in. Don't discredit. Let me kind of looking back through the different questions, but I guess in the meantime, yeah, know that you're not alone. Feel free to reach out. Um, my email is angelicapeña@peralta.edu. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or concerns, and I'll spend some time here reading through the chat. Oh, yes, let me share my email while the evaluation is.
Oh, I already shared it there. angelicapeña@peralta.edu, right?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa, for sharing the summer counseling hours. Yeah, and I'm looking through the questions as we record. Yeah, but happy to support. Yeah, any questions if you're thinking about transferring to another country? Again, I think just double checking that university, the different requirements when it comes to being like an international student, because it may not be right the 60 units. Cool. We have folks interested in Santa Cruz, UCLA. Okay, PhD visit. Love that. Yeah, but definitely recommend checking in with a counselor or a couple of counselors, right? Especially as you're updating your ed plan, creating an ed plan. But I think it's definitely important to have your list of schools come in with your questions because it could definitely be scary and policies are constantly changing. So definitely encourage you all to reach out.
And then we're gonna quickly share the upcoming sessions. Let me go ahead and just copy the link real quick.
I'm just looking through.
Oh wait, I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing real quick and just.
Oh yeah, let me. Oh, should I stop sharing? Yeah, let me stop sharing. Or did it already? Oh, I
I
think.
think it, yeah, I
Oh,
think it's
yeah.
off. It's all
Sorry.
good. So for anyone else who is interested in joining us to um any of the other upcoming workshops, we have one on the 26th, which is on Thursday on CSU app overview. Then July 1st, we have UC app overview. July 9th is going to be a PIQ overview for the UC application. Then we have an extracurriculars overview and a tag overview. We do have drop-in sessions available as well to support y'all with PIQs and with the application. Um, I believe that the application for CSU and for UCs for fall 2026 isn't open yet. But the transfer admission planners are open, so you can start by filling out that those planners.
Mhm.
And yeah, let us know if you have any more questions. Let me check the chat real quick.
Yeah. I saw a
It,
question.
mhm.
Oh, oh, go ahead.
Oh no, sorry. What were you gonna say?
Oh, I saw a question from Henry around like increasing your chances, especially UCs, right? Competitive majors. And I think when it comes, it's a holistic process. So again, it's not just going to be about completing the classes, major prep classes, but also looking at extracurricular activities, things that you may be involved in. How have you prepared for your major outside of academics? And I know that's definitely hard, especially with these high unit majors. It's a lot to balance, but I think those being involved, clubs, different things like that on campus could be helpful.
And then I added the tiny URL so y'all can register for any of the upcoming workshops and drop-in supports. But with that, I think if no one else has any questions, thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, Angelica, so much for facilitating today's Transfer 101. A lot of great information, a lot of great questions from everyone. We're excited to see y'all hopefully in the next workshops.
Yes, please stop by. I'm gonna be doing the PIQ one. So if y'all want to come back, I'll be here July 9th. Same time.
Same time, same place.
Yeah, same time, same place. Cool. Bye, y'all. Have a good rest of your day.